To think like a leader is not to stand above others, but to stand awake. Most people are busy reacting to fear, reacting to noise, reacting to expectations placed upon them by society. Leadership begins the moment you stop reacting and start observing. When you can watch your thoughts instead of being dragged by them, you discover a quiet center within yourself. From that center, clarity arises. And clarity is the true power behind leadership. A leader does not ask, how do I control people? A leader asks, how do I understand the movement of life itself? When you understand life, you move with it instead of against it. You stop forcing outcomes and start allowing intelligence to flow through your actions. This is why true leaders appear calm even in chaos. They are not calm because leadership begins long before authority, titles, or recognition enter the picture. It starts at the level of awareness. Most people move through life half asleep, driven by habits, emotions, and borrowed ideas about who they should be. They think they are choosing, but in reality they are reacting. Awareness is the moment you step out of this automatic pattern and begin to notice what is actually happening inside you. When you can observe your thoughts instead of instantly believing them, you create space. And in that space, real leadership is born. To be aware means to watch the mind without trying to control it. Thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky, but the unaware person thinks they are the sky itself. They become tangled in every fear, every doubt, every impulse. A leader, however, learns to stand back and observe. This does not make them passive, it makes them precise. When you see clearly, you act clearly. When your perception is sharp, your decisions are not confused by emotional noise. Many people believe leadership is about having strong opinions and firm answers. Awareness shows you something deeper, that wisdom often begins with not knowing. When you are aware, you are not rushing to prove yourself right. You are listening to people, to situations, to life as it unfolds. This listening creates understanding, and understanding naturally leads to intelligent action. A mind that is quiet can see patterns that a noisy mind completely misses. Awareness also reveals the difference between the ego and true authority. The ego wants control, recognition, and validation. It reacts defensively when challenged and aggressively when insecure. Awareness exposes these movements instantly. The moment you see them, they lose their grip on you. This is why awareness is power. You are no longer pushed around by unconscious motives. Your actions come from intention rather than impulse. When awareness becomes a habit, clarity follows. You stop overthinking because you are no longer fighting reality. Instead of asking, how do I look? You begin to ask, what is actually needed here? This shift changes everything. People sense it. They feel safe around someone who is present and grounded. Without saying much, such a person creates stability in uncertain situations. Awareness also teaches humility. You realize that leadership is not about imposing your will on life, but cooperating with it. When you are aware, you understand that every situation has its own intelligence. You stop forcing outcomes and start aligning with what works naturally. This does not make you weak, it makes you effective. In this way, awareness becomes the foundation of leadership, not because it gives you dominance over others, but because it gives you mastery over yourself. And when you can lead your own mind, your words gain weight, your silence gains meaning, and your presence begins to guide others without effort. Most human behavior is shaped by reaction. A sound is heard, a comment is made, a situation unfolds, and immediately the mind jumps in with judgment, emotion, and impulse. This happens so quickly that people assume it is choice, when in fact it is conditioning. To react is to allow the past to control the present. A leader understands this difference deeply and learns the art of response instead. The pause between what happens and what you do is where leadership lies. Reaction is driven by fear, pride, and habit. Someone disagrees with you, and the ego feels threatened. A problem appears, and anxiety rushes in demanding immediate action. In such moments, the mind is not seeing clearly, it is defending itself. When actions come from this state, they often create more problems than they solve. A leader does not deny emotion, but they do not surrender to it either. They allow the emotion to be present without letting it take the steering wheel. Response requires awareness. It means noticing the surge of emotion, the tightening in the body, the stories the mind begins to tell, and choosing not to act from that place. This pause may last only a few seconds, but its impact is enormous. In that moment of stillness, perspective returns. You begin to see the situation as it is, not as your fears describe it. From here, action becomes intelligent rather than impulsive. To respond rather than react is not to be slow or indecisive. On the contrary, it creates precision. A reactive mind is scattered, jumping from one impulse to another. A responsive mind is focused. It knows when to act and when to wait. It understands that not every situation requires immediate interference. Sometimes the most powerful move is silence, allowing events to reveal their own direction. This quality is especially visible in moments of pressure. When others panic, the reactive mind amplifies chaos. The responsive mind becomes a stabilizing force. Calmness in such moments is not indifference, it is clarity. People naturally look to the one who is not shaken, not because they demand authority, but because steadiness inspires trust. Response also changes how you relate to people. When you stop reacting, you begin to hear what others are actually saying rather than what you think they mean. You listen beyond words, noticing tone, intention, and unspoken concerns. This deep listening dissolves conflict before it escalates. Many disagreements persist not because of real differences, but because of reactive misunderstanding. As this practice deepens, life itself begins to feel less like a battle. You are no longer constantly resisting or defending. Instead, you move with circumstances, adjusting intelligently as they change. This flexibility is strength, not weakness. It allows you to act decisively without being rigid, confidently without being aggressive. In learning to respond rather than react, you free yourself from being controlled by external events. You reclaim the ability to choose your actions consciously. And in doing so, you become someone whose presence brings order rather than confusion, direction rather than noise. Fear is often misunderstood. Most people see it as a warning sign that says stop, retreat, and protect yourself. But fear is not an enemy, it is information. It appears precisely at the boundary where the known ends and the unknown begins. A leader understands this and does not treat fear as a barrier, but as a signal that growth is near. The absence of fear usually means you are repeating what you already know. The presence of fear means you are stepping into something larger than your current identity. The reactive mind tries to eliminate fear by avoiding risk. It looks for certainty, guarantees, and approval before taking action. But life does not offer guarantees, and leadership cannot wait for perfect conditions. When fear arises, it is the ego sensing loss of control. The ego wants safety and familiarity, even if that familiarity is limiting. A leader sees through this illusion and recognizes that discomfort is not danger. It is simply the sensation of expansion. Fear becomes paralyzing only when it is resisted. The moment you label it as bad or wrong, it grows stronger. But when you allow fear to be present without trying to escape it, something interesting happens. It loses its intensity. You begin to notice that fear is not a solid wall, but a passing state. It rises, peaks, and fades like a wave. Understanding this gives you freedom. You realize you can act even while fear is present. This is why courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move with it. Leaders do not wait to feel ready. They move forward while feeling uncertain. They understand that clarity often comes after action, not before it. By stepping into what feels uncomfortable, they gather real experience instead of imagined outcomes. Experience dissolves fear far more effectively than thinking ever can. Fear also sharpens awareness. When you are afraid, your senses heighten. You become more alert, more focused. Used wisely, this energy can be transformed into precision and presence. The same force that can paralyze can also empower, depending on how it is met. When fear is met with awareness instead of resistance, it becomes fuel rather than friction. Avoiding fear has a hidden cost. Each time you retreat from it, you reinforce the belief that you are incapable. Over time, this shrinks your world. Opportunities are missed, potential remains dormant, and life becomes repetitive. Leaders sense this danger and choose the discomfort of growth over the comfort of stagnation. They understand that a life without risk is not safe, it is small. As this understanding deepens, fear loses its authority. It no longer dictates decisions. It simply informs them. You listen to fear without obeying it. You respect it without surrendering to it. This balanced relationship allows you to move forward intelligently, not recklessly, but not timidly either. In this way, fear becomes a guide rather than a guard. It points you toward the very experiences that shape strength, wisdom, and confidence. By walking through fear instead of around it, leadership naturally emerges, not as an act of force, but as a quiet trust in your ability to meet whatever arises. Responsibility is often confused with burden. Many people hear the word and immediately imagine weight, pressure, and blame. They think responsibility means carrying guilt for mistakes or punishing themselves when things go wrong. A leader understands responsibility in a much deeper and lighter way. It is not about blame at all. It is about awareness and response. To be responsible is simply to recognize that your actions matter and to respond consciously to what life places in front of you. The habit of blame is rooted in fear. When something fails, the mind looks for someone to point at: others, circumstances, the past, or even fate. Blame gives temporary relief because it shifts discomfort away from the self, but it also removes power. The moment you blame, you give away your ability to change the situation. Leaders see this clearly. They are not interested in protecting their image. They are interested in understanding what actually happened. Taking responsibility does not mean judging yourself harshly. On the contrary, self-judgment clouds perception. When you are busy condemning yourself, you cannot see clearly enough to learn. Responsibility without blame means observing outcomes honestly, without emotional distortion. It is the ability to say, this is what happened, this is my part in it, and this is what can be learned. This attitude transforms mistakes into insight instead of shame. When responsibility is approached this way, it becomes freeing rather than heavy. You stop wasting energy on excuses and explanations. You focus instead on adjustment and growth. This is why leaders recover quickly from failure. They do not carry it as an identity. They treat it as information. Each result, whether successful or not, becomes feedback rather than a verdict on their worth. This mindset also changes how you relate to others. Without blame, there is no need for defensiveness. Conversations become open instead of tense. When people feel they are not being judged, they are more willing to be honest. This honesty allows problems to be addressed at their root, instead of being hidden under layers of justification. A leader who takes responsibility without blame creates an environment where learning is possible. Responsibility also means recognizing where your control ends. You are responsible for your intentions, actions, and responses, but not for every outcome. Life is complex, influenced by countless variables beyond any individual's reach. Understanding this prevents arrogance in success and despair in failure. You act fully, yet you remain flexible. You care deeply, yet you are not attached to control. As this understanding deepens, responsibility becomes a natural expression of maturity. You no longer see yourself as a victim of circumstances, nor as the sole controller of events. You see yourself as a participant in a larger process. From this perspective, action becomes cleaner and more effective. In embracing responsibility without blame, you reclaim your power quietly. You stop fighting reality and start learning from it. And in that learning, leadership grows, not through domination or judgment, but through clarity, accountability, and intelligent response. Most people live either in memory or imagination. Their attention is pulled backward into regret or forward into anxiety, rarely resting where life is actually happening. The mind believes this constant movement is necessary for control and security, yet it creates the very confusion it tries to escape. A leader understands that real power does not exist in the past or the future. It exists only in the present moment, where action, perception, and choice are possible. The past is fixed. No amount of thinking can change it. The future is imagined, shaped by fear and hope rather than certainty. When the mind is trapped between these two, it becomes fragmented. Decisions made from this state are weak because they are based on stories rather than reality. Presence gathers the mind into one place. When attention is fully here, Perception becomes sharp and action becomes direct. Being present does not mean ignoring planning or experience. It means using them without being imprisoned by them. A leader learns from the past without reliving it, and plans for the future without worrying about it. Once learning and planning are complete, attention returns to now. This return is essential because every meaningful decision must be made in the present, not in thought about the present. Presence also changes how influence works. When someone is fully present, people feel it immediately. There is a sense of grounding, of steadiness that does not come from words or authority. It comes from attention. A distracted mind leaks energy. A present mind concentrates it. This concentration is what makes even simple actions effective. In moments of crisis, presence becomes even more important. Panic arises when the mind projects imagined outcomes into the future. Regret arises when it replays the past. A present mind does neither. It looks at what is happening now and asks, what is needed in this moment? This question cuts through complexity. Solutions that seem impossible in a scattered mind often become obvious in a focused one. Presence also brings patience. When you are fully here, you are not rushing to escape the moment. You allow situations to unfold at their own pace. This patience is not passivity, it is trust. Trust that clarity will emerge when it is needed. Leaders who embody this are rarely rushed, yet they are rarely late. Their timing feels natural because it is guided by awareness rather than anxiety. As presence deepens, you begin to notice subtle details others miss. Tone, timing, shifts in energy. These details inform wiser decisions. Leadership then becomes less about effort and more about sensitivity. You respond appropriately because you are actually paying attention. When power is rooted in the present moment, action becomes clean and effective. There is no inner resistance, no divided attention. You are simply here doing what needs to be done. And from this simplicity, influence arises naturally, not from force or urgency, but from clarity and presence. Many people try to lead by copying what they believe leadership should look like. They adopt certain tones, gestures, and attitudes, hoping these borrowed forms will earn respect. But imitation can never create true influence. Authenticity is not a strategy, it is a state of being. When a person is genuinely themselves, without masks, without pretension, there is a natural authority that cannot be manufactured. Leaders understand that influence flows from inner alignment, not external performance. Authenticity begins when you stop seeking approval. The desire to be liked fragments the mind. You begin adjusting yourself to fit expectations, saying what is safe instead of what is true. In doing so, your words lose power because they are no longer connected to your inner reality. A leader is willing to risk disapproval for the sake of honesty. This does not mean being careless or harsh, it means being real. People may not always agree, but they can feel sincerity, and sincerity builds trust. When you are authentic, your actions are consistent. There is no gap between what you say and what you do. This consistency creates reliability, and reliability creates influence. People follow not because they are persuaded, but because they feel they know where you stand. Uncertainty in leadership rarely comes from lack of skill. It comes from inner contradiction. Authenticity dissolves this contradiction by aligning intention, word, and action. Authenticity also frees you from comparison. When you are busy comparing yourself to others, you are no longer present in your own role. You begin chasing images instead of expressing your own strengths. Leaders recognize that each person has a unique way of contributing. Instead of imitating, they refine their own voice. This self-trust allows them to act decisively without constantly checking for validation. True influence does not push, it invites. When someone is authentic, others feel permission to be authentic as well. This creates an atmosphere of openness rather than fear. In such an environment, creativity increases and resistance decreases. People give their best not because they are pressured, but because they feel seen and respected. Authenticity also includes humility. A leader who is authentic does not pretend to know everything. They admit uncertainty when it is present and learn openly when growth is needed. This honesty strengthens rather than weakens authority. It signals confidence that does not rely on image. People trust those who are comfortable with their limitations because it shows self-awareness. As authenticity deepens, influence becomes effortless. You no longer need to convince or control. Your presence communicates more than your words. People sense alignment, and alignment is magnetic. It draws others not through force, but through resonance. In this way, leadership emerges naturally, not as a role you play, but as an expression of who you are. When you stop trying to lead and simply live in truth, influence follows quietly, steadily, and powerfully. Leadership is not about titles, authority, or the applause of others. It is a reflection of the clarity, courage, presence, and authenticity that you cultivate within yourself. When you lead from awareness, respond instead of react, embrace fear, take responsibility without blame, live fully in the present, and act authentically, leadership becomes a natural expression of your being. It is not something you force or demand. It is something that flows effortlessly from a mind and heart aligned with life itself. True leadership inspires not through instruction, but through the quiet, powerful example of a life fully awake. They know everything, but because they are not afraid of not knowing.